You are listening to the global network of podcasters dedicated to the pharmacy profession. Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Marina Buksov, holistic health coach, clinical herbalist, and functional medicine pharmacist, or just holistic pharmacist for short. I'll be sharing inspiring stories of my guests who have shifted into holistic modalities, both personally and professionally. My co-host, Dr. Jenna Carmichael, will be joining me to lead the Journal Club episodes to share an evidence-based approach to holistic and herbal medicine. I'm so glad you're here and hope you enjoy the show. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. I am so excited that I have a very special guest with me today. As always, after a period of about a few weeks of not posting, at least I have a really good one for you guys today. So David Steinman is a journalist and best-selling author of Raising Healthy Kids: How to Protect Your Children from the Hidden Chemical Toxins in Our Everyday Lives. And he's also the chief officer of the nation's most active consumer rights nonprofit, the Healthy Living Foundation, which has won court cases against big brands such as Herbal Essences, Pantene, Patagonia, Johnson's, and others. David strives to raise awareness about environmental dangers and proposes valuable alternatives and affordable substitutes to ensure families can keep their loved ones safe from these harmful substances. So, David, I am so passionate about this very topic, and I'm so glad that you're a guest today. And I want to dive into all of these safer alternatives that you're mentioning. And before we do that, I'd love to just ask where you grew up and how you came to do this kind of work.
So I grew up in California, Los Angeles, California, and I'm one of the first folks to be poisoned by DDT in the Santa Monica Bay. When I was a kid, I fished all the time in the Santa Monica Bay. Unknown to me, there was a chemical company called Montrose manufacturing DDT that dumped several thousand tons of DDT waste sludge into the Santa Monica Bay where I fished. And when I was a journalist for the LA Weekly, I did a study in which I and other experts a team I put together, we measured the amount of DDT and PCBs, another poison, polychlorinated biphenyl, in the blood of men and women eating fish from the local waters or who weren't eating fish from the local waters. And as it turned out, people eating fish from the local waters, as we suspected, had very high amounts of DDT and PCBs. I had my own blood tested then, and I also had high levels. And that's what clued me into, and the story was published and helped to make the Santa Monica Bay a Superfund site. But it also clued me into the fact that if I kept doing what I was doing and eating contaminated seafood, that I'd have astronomical levels in a few more years. So I really changed my eating habits and began to research the food supply. And that led to my first book, Diet for a Poisoned Planet, which was a bestseller. And I've been reporting and working in this area ever since.
Wow, I'm so sorry, first of all, that you had gone through that experience. And at the same time, it sounds like you found a way out of it and forward to help other people and hopefully prevent and protect our future generations from this kind of poisoning in the future. So I'm curious, what got you into journalism specifically in order to reach that impact? And it sounds like in a bigger way, on a bigger platform, because, a lot of people go in many different directions. So what drew you into wanting to be a journalist and also becoming an author?
Well, Marina, I always wanted to write. And writing for me is a way of putting together the world and making it whole again. I think I go through the day questioning things and wondering about things and forgetting things, and I write everything down Like I write everything down. If I do push-ups, I'll write that down. Um, and I wanted to experience life. And also, I was quite naive. Journalism is a heck of a way to make a living. It's a wonderful profession, but uh, it's also become kind of a commodity item. And so it's a difficult way to make a living. Um, but uh, I'm sure that a long time ago, I think my mom and dad wanted me to become a lawyer or a doctor or something like that. But I was too influenced by rock and roll music and Jack Kerouac and other things that were in my life. I'm really glad that I did choose journalism. I think I've been able to contribute to making the world a better place through my reporting and writing.
So, how did you get to be an environmentalist? It sounds like, right? And also to leading your nonprofit organization where you get to challenge these big companies and industries that cause some of this pollution. How did that all come about? Did you know that you were starting out in that direction, or how did you come here to this space?
Uh, Moving from journalism to activism was a big deal because as a journalist, what you learn is that you're there to be a witness, but not necessarily to influence events. But when I was reporting on some of these things, like the Santa Monica Bay, for example, my testimony at the congressional hearing that was held after we discovered these high levels of poison in people was indispensable to getting the Bay declared a Superfund site and to alerting other people. And then later, when I would find like chemicals, like I found chemicals like dioxane, which is a carcinogen, in our testing. I was testing because nobody knew in the 80s and 90s what was in their products. And this seems like ancient history, but actually, even manufacturers didn't even have to list what was in their products or tell you when you called on the phone. So it was really, I understood that it was kind of a hidden, these were hidden toxins. Also, cancer rates were going way up in the 80s and 90s. They're going back up again among our millennials. And it was kind of obvious to those who were doing the research that chemicals in our food supply, in our consumer products, in the air we breathe, the water we drink, were causing these cancers increases. Industry wanted to have us believe that this was just a natural phenomenon that happens when you get older, you get cancer. But that's not true. When you're in your 50s, you're not supposed to get cancer. When you're 16 years old or 5 years old, you're not supposed to get leukemia or brain cancer. These are not natural occurrences. They don't occur through natural variation. They're from chemical exposures. Industry was hiding all this. And I found that when I revealed it in my reporting, that shaming industry wasn't enough. So I would report, for example, I reported that many children's bubble bath products, and this is in my new book, Raising Healthy Kids, had dioxane, which is a carcinogen, in them, and it was dangerous for our kids, which it is. But if you try to shame a company, they don't care. The only thing that really matters is when you hit them in their pocketbook. Money is what matters to them. So I kind of had to morph. Well, I know all this information, so I kind of had to morph from what I knew to taking action because no one else was doing it. So, for example, when I found high levels of this chemical dioxane in Herbal Essences shampoo and Pantene shampoo, shaming Procter & Gamble was not going to work. So I found an attorney and I started researching the law, and I found an attorney who would take on the case in California under the Safe Drinking Water and Toxic Enforcement Act, which allowed me as a citizen to sue Procter & Gamble for not disclosing these hidden chemical toxins in their products. So I morphed from journalism strictly into activism because no one else was doing what needed to be done. And I could see it was kind of a niche. my background allowed me to interface with attorneys and with facts and make some change. So it was a big decision to move from, which I did about 13, 14 years ago, to move from pure journalism into activism. Now I do both. And um, journalism is activism. I mean, it is. But what I'm doing when I hire, when our attorneys sue companies is even more pronounced. Um, but so now I do activism and journalism. And I think it's leading to more change because, as I said, you can't make these companies change often without penalties, and taking money out of their pocketbooks is one of the worst things that can happen to a corporation in their minds.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we can talk about this in many different ways, but I love how you alluded to like the objectivity of a journalist, but then having to take that information and actually convert it to something more purposeful through activism. Because as a scientist, I have a pharmacist background. It's kind of the same thing, right? Like we study things and we look for patterns, but then when we come to a conclusion of those observations, that should be the focal point of changing the way we do things, right? If we discover something, then that can be that key that allows us to make different choices from now on. If we discover that the old ways are not working, right? Or we discover some new fact or discovery, this is exactly what needs to happen between us just being a bystander and observing. Even like when we look at like photography, right, as part of journalism, and there's all these conflicts that people are documenting, but then when do you shift from just being a bystander, right, into now doing something about it? Because it's a fine line, right? If you want to remain objective, that's totally respectful. And at the same time, we are human beings and hopefully we're evolving to be better versions of ourselves and of humanity. And so we need to kind of understand that line for ourselves individually and also collectively. I think right now, the fact that we're having this conversation is really crucial because with social media and with all the information that is already available through science and evidence and facts, like you said, and observation, right? People already are starting to have much more awareness than ever before about all these forces stacked against us and about all these environmental things. Like right now, we just had the Hurricane Helene, and before that, we have climate change, we have forests burning down, we have right now we're having actually a heat wave in New York. We're like in the high 70s at the end of October. So strange things, right? And then there's wars and conflicts and money and industry all in the mix. So when we are bombarded by all this information, what actually activates us as people to take different actions in your experience? What is the key?
Well, protecting our kids. I don't know a single parent that wouldn't do anything they can to protect their kids. So I think acting outside of our own interests is a very, very strong incentive. A lot of times what we will accept for ourselves, we won't accept for our kids and friends. At least that's how I feel about it. So I think kids are a huge motivating factor. Our own personal health is also important, but it's what I've been doing in my most recent book, Raising Healthy Kids, Protecting Your Children from Hidden Chemical Toxins, is I show you how to protect your children, but you're really protecting yourself too as a parent, because everything you do to protect your children eventually is what you do yourself. If you, for example, one of the big rules that I stress is buying organic foods. That's kind of a cornerstone of being healthy. And organic foods can be more expensive. And so people might say, well, why should I spend more money for food because it's, is with inflation and everything, it's expensive enough, right? But what people find out after they go on an organic diet and do the other things that I suggest in my book is they actually feel healthier and their kids are healthier and life is better. I know that sounds like a big promise, but organic is the real thing. And what I'm trying to stress to folks is what a big change it makes. Um, there's a lot of naysayers out there who will say, well, organic foods are no different than chemically sprayed foods, and these chemicals like pesticides that are sprayed on non-organic foods are not dangerous to your health. That's just not true. That flies in the face of all the published and peer-reviewed literature. The truth is, and what people discover is when they have an organic diet, their kids have fewer incidences of diabetes, obesity, skin allergies. Their risk for cancer goes down. Mom, if you're on an organic diet during pregnancy, you'll have fewer complications. And dad, if you're on an organic diet, you will have healthier and more plentiful sperm. So these are documented health benefits. So, in terms of what motivates folks, that ought to be a big motivation because that organic diet is going to do more for you than your health insurance. It's why when you're in your 50s and 60s, as you get older, you'll be healthier and stronger. It's why your kids will have less ADHD, why your kids will have less problems with obesity, why they'll be better behaved. Some of the chemicals that we're talking about that organic foods avoid are called organophosphates. And what these really are little nerve poisons. They were the same kind of chemicals that were developed in Germany almost a century ago as nerve gases. And they affect the nervous system. And what researchers have found is that when kids are exposed to the organophosphates in our foods, they have more ADHD, they have cognitive loss, and also researchers have seen through magnetic resonance imaging that portions of the kids' brains are now dead zones. And that's because portions of the brain are being destroyed by these little poisons. And for example, every single bakery product the group of which I'm chief officer, Healthy Living Foundation, has tested actually has these organophosphates. So by going organic, you are really doing a great deal to improve your health as an adult and your children's health. And I think when people start to do that, they discover, oh, I do feel healthier. I'm not going to go back. So I think your health and your kids, your personal health and your kids are two of the most motivating factors for folks to make changes and do things that are better for themselves.
Yeah, so many great points there, David. I have to say, as a pharmacist, we did learn about organophosphate poisons, but it makes absolute sense when you said it that way, that taking little quantities of these from foods actually poisons us over time, especially if we're pregnant or conceiving at that time, and then it passes on to the offspring, because that's such a vulnerable time.
Yeah.
Also
right.
read that glyphosate is one of the causes that gluten is so hyperallergenic for people, why so many people have autoimmune type of inflammatory responses to eating gluten. And this is why we recommend that's one of the first things that people try to eliminate from their diet. It's not only because it's gluten, it's also because of the pesticides that are used for growing that, and then the way that we monocrop and all of that stuff, and the way that it's regulated here, and the way that public health is regulated here versus how it's regulated in other countries also makes a difference. So what would you say is something that you wish people would know about either organic foods or the lifestyle that you're describing? And if you could also quickly dispel the myth that buying organic is similar, like, because you don't really know if what they're doing is actually organic or if maybe they're using other types of pesticides that are organic. What's your take on that?
So organic is the real thing. I've looked at thousands of monitoring reports from the state of California and other sources, and organic foods are definitely lower. They're not perfect, but they're definitely far, far, far lower in harmful pesticides. So there's always going to be some deceit in every industry. Organic is no different. There are things that the organic industry needs to work on, like some foods have high levels of lead. The industry needs to work on that. But overall, it's a big, studies have shown that kids who are put on an organic diet, the amount of these harmful pesticides that are measured in their urine, they disappear completely. So we know that organic reduces your exposure. And the thing I wish people knew more about when it comes to organic foods is that it's affordable. One of the big myths is that organic foods have to be more expensive. And it's true that some organic foods can be a little more expensive, but the basic staples like lettuce, carrots, potatoes, apples, bread, and milk are usually competitively priced now with non-organic foods. So you can buy all the staples for about the same price. And that's really a big improvement because, 20 years ago, organics were much more expensive when they were just starting out. But we consumers have learned that we like organic foods, and the demand is so high that more and more farmers are producing organic foods. And as a result, the price is going down. Now, some organic foods, like I said, may be a little more expensive, especially soft-skinned fruits like strawberries, blueberries. Those prices are coming down too. But also, what I do in my own family is you can buy frozen organic blueberries, strawberries, bananas, from your local. There's so many different stores that are Walmart, for example. And when you buy them frozen in these 2 and 3 pound packs, they're actually really cheap. They don't go bad. And when your kids want a dessert, you can give them a little non-fat organic yogurt with organic fruit. It's a really healthy, sugar-free dessert and much healthier for your kids. So that's the other thing I want to dispel about organics is that they are always going to be more expensive. It's just not true.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that we consider when we recommend organic foods to people is, will people be able to afford it? Because now with the prices rising, right, and we have inflation going on, I find myself spending so much more in groceries than I used to. But of course, I do try to shop for organic. Now, I will say that I prefer the full fat products. And I think that's another myth that we can table for another conversation. But I love the idea of the frozen fruit and berries because I agree that that can be price savvy to shop for frozen goods that are good quality and will last in the fridge and will still have a lot of their vitamins and minerals intact. So you're not losing anything. And I like to throw them in my oatmeal and other things that I'm doing. So David, I'd love to ask you on this topic where now I'm seeing people are almost getting like environmentally depressed. And what I mean by that is they see all of these things and these odds stacked against us from the pricing of good food to the industries that, as we mentioned, are polluting us both from the consumer and everywhere, really, our healthcare system, our food system, any industry, right? Computers, cars, they are potentially harming us, right? So what do we do about this? And I know you mentioned, having a healthier future for our kids is a motivating factor, but I've also seen young people not wanting to have kids because they see people as this kind of parasite that is infecting the earth, right? And we are basically polluting ourselves at this point. So what is the way out of here? out of this pollution?
Marina, that's a profound question. You know, by the way, when you say a lot of kids um, are thinking they don't want to have kids, a lot of young people are thinking they don't want to have kids. There's a lot of young people who do want to have kids and can't have kids. And, you know, we have inundated, that's kind of a faith question, isn't it? It's like, do you believe that we're good for the earth or bad for the earth? Can we be a beneficial influence or negative? And, we are so fortunate in the United States to be talking about these things because, elsewhere in the world, they're talking about bombs, and death and immediate death from war. So we're very fortunate. I think we have to look at it that way. What we've built in America gives us the power to talk about these things. They're not talking about these things in other parts of the world. They don't have the luxury. I think if you look at it that way, that alone tells you, we have a special responsibility here. While so much of the world is engaged in war and authoritarianism, in America, we're discussing how to save the planet and what our impact is on the planet environmentally. And I think, with kids, we have to infuse them with a sense of empowerment that they can make change. And, the last chapter in my book is called Deep Caring. And I write about a family in Pennsylvania that's an activist family. They all go to protest together. They're fighting the plastic plants there. And I've met so many heroic folks in writing my book who have shown me the power of caring. And I think we have to try to infuse that as parents in our kids. And that's kind of like we have the power to make positive change in people's lives. And I think that we don't, and I think, look, we all despair. We all despair. And we can go through days of despair, minutes of despair. Sometimes to get out of the despair, you just have to take a nap, and reset yourself, Marina. But in writing my book, I met so many heroic folks who are doing things that I feel like I don't have an excuse. Like I met Sharon C. Levine and Robert Taylor in an area of the country called Cancer Alley, which is in Louisiana. And this is a stretch of the Mississippi River between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, where there's some 200 chemical plants packed in along about 85 miles of riverbank. And the folks there are fighting the placement of more plants into their neighborhoods and communities. And they are fighting heroic battles against an indifferent state government. Louisiana is not particularly progressive, shall we say. There's a lot of progressive people there, but we need to bring them out. So when I look around me at people who have less fortunate circumstances than me, and I think if kids do that too, they can kind of see that they really don't have an excuse to fall into complete despair, that the world needs them to be useful and empowered. And I think really it's like, how do you do it? One of the things I think we ought to be doing in schools is teaching kids how to shop safely, because there's so much power in our everyday choices. Just to give you an example, Marina, we were talking about organic foods. And there's a town in California called Salinas. And it's uh, called the nation's salad bowl because so much of our lettuce is grown there, strawberries are growing there. And when I used to go there as a journalist, all the schools that are carved out of the farm fields were surrounded by fields being sprayed by pesticides. And when I went there recently during the pandemic to write my book, new book, the same schools I used to visit that were surrounded by pesticide sprayed fields were now surrounded by organic strawberry and lettuce fields. And I kind of considered it a miracle and a matter of faith. So we talked about how this, which the question you're asking is almost a religious one. I called up a teacher who teaches in the Salinas School District, and I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Well, because of you, David, and consumers like you who have been buying all those organic strawberries and all that organic lettuce, the farmers here are producing more and more organic fields. And now when the kids go to school, instead of being sprayed with pesticides that drift from the farm fields onto the school grounds, it's all organic. And that's because of folks like you." And I was thinking to myself, I don't know any of these kids. And I live 300 miles south of where they are. And yet my choices made a difference in their lives. So that to me was like a miracle because I'd been buying all these strawberries and lettuce, people telling me, well, you're spending too much money, you don't need to buy organic. I kept the faith. And then I had my faith reaffirmed with that visit. So I would share with kids who feel that they're a parasite on the earth or that we're harming the earth that you can do a lot of good too, and that we need you. We really do need you. And that's kind of a story of why your choices do make a difference in other people's lives.
Yeah, you're speaking about the butterfly effect almost, right? That your choices actually have so many levels of impact, and we don't know where one little choice is going to actually amount to so many amazing potentially things. And of course, on the other side of it, it could be the terrible things, which is why work like yours is so important to just initially raise awareness of those choices and then help society make different decisions. And ideally, as you're saying, through larger activism, we can impact at the government level, which I believe needs to happen because, like you said, we are privileged, especially living in New York and California, to be thinking about these things and to have all these amazing, access to resources of other people also doing great work and giving us that information. And then, of course, social media as well. And then I originally am from Ukraine. And of course, there's war happening there now. And you mentioned in other parts of the world as well. And then the whole reason why we even have agriculture is for a grand reason, right? To keep people from going hungry. And at the same time, the way that we're going about it is slowly harming those very people that it's feeding. So these are the big questions. And I love how you answered my big question of faith as well. And I agree. I think the only way to move forward is to look for the benefit and for the symbiosis and for the way forward instead of, like you said, shaming, right? Shaming the industry doesn't work, and really calling anybody out doesn't really work. I recently heard a talk about calling in. It was a TED talk versus calling out. So it's really about just asking those questions and raising that awareness and motivation for people to make those different choices, including the government, including industries, which can benefit all of us. So like you said, it could come down to the bottom line, which is money, right? And that's one of the things. And also the livelihood of people and all the other inhabitants of the earth too. And as an herbalist, I believe and I was taught that we as humans, as sentient beings, should be stewards of the earth, right? And we can be. So it's not that we have to have this parasitic relationship. We can actually have a really beautiful symbiotic relationship and provide these building blocks so that we can actually get there. So this leads me to my final question to you, which is what can the average person really do in their everyday life to have their, consumer power, the consumer dollar go a long way, and any other recommendations for us to become symbiotic with the earth?
Great question. Well, please get a copy of Raising Healthy Kids, Protecting Your Children from Hidden Chemical Toxins, because it really does show you how your personal choices have a tremendous effect on everybody, on everyone's health. Just, besides foods, I talk about, well, how do you buy safe clothing? How do you buy safe cleaning products, safe cosmetics? And all of these are things that we need to be aware of now. It's a modern world. It's not your grandmother's world. This is a different world of chemical intensity. It's literally changing, modifying the genes of our kids. Unfortunately, we're making them more sensitive to chemical carcinogens. That's why cancer rates among millennials are going up. See, if you're exposed to these chemicals in the womb, your body becomes sensitized to them. Your cells actually get imprinted so that later on you become even more sensitized to them. I would say, though, that one of the biggest ways we influence our nation is through our shopping choices. We vote with our shopping dollars. And, if you want a healthier world, whether you're 12, 15, or 45 or 75, you can do a lot of things. Just take for an example, all that plastic bottled water that people are buying. As I said, I have visited Cancer Alley. That's where the chemicals for all these plastic bottles are made, is down there. So think of it. One of the reasons why people are drinking bottled water is because they know their water is not safe, right? But the same plastic bottles that people are now buying their water in not only contribute nanoparticles of plastic that get into people's brains, sexual organs, testicles, the placenta in pregnant women. There are also the chemicals that are killing our neighbors in other communities in Pennsylvania, Louisiana, Alabama. So one of the things we can do is, for example, stop buying so much plastic. I share, for example, instead of buying bottled water, which is expensive and you have to lug it from your car upstairs, or get a home filter system. I wrote my book so that anyone can do these things. You can buy a really good faucet filter for $30 online. Then you can get a little zero water pitcher that filters out even forever chemicals, which we can talk about in another show, and make a huge difference in your life for $50. But it's not just that you're helping yourself. Now you're not buying all that plastic bottled water. So it has less, that means there's less incentive for chemical manufacturers to put in more plastic plants, like in Pennsylvania or Louisiana, which they want to do. Like the last thing we need are more polyester suits, right? And neoprene beer koozies. We don't need these things. Like when people buy a mouse pad for their computer, Marina, most of these mouse pads are made with foam, neoprene foam. And the plant that makes that neoprene, I have visited it. There's a school right next to it where the kids are being poisoned by chloroprene, which is used to make the neoprene. So what I share with folks is, instead of buying a neoprene computer pad, buy one made out of cork, which is sustainable. And you can do that now. We have these choices. As I said with the farm fields of Salinas, our shopping choices can perform miracles. So I would say becoming more conscientious as a shopper, not only about your foods, but about your cleaning products, your cosmetics, especially if you're pregnant, your clothing. Just for another example, if your kids go go to a private school, they may be wearing clothing that the school wants them to wear, uniforms. And if that uniform is stain or water resistant, it's probably got forever chemicals in the fabric that are going to rub off in the kids' bodies. So just being aware and knowing how, and I show you all this in my new book, it not only improves your health, but can go a long way towards your voting for a healthier environment. So I would say to folks, try to be a more conscientious shopper. These are things that we should be taught in school as a matter of core curriculum. So my book is kind of like a black belt course in protecting yourself from the hidden chemical toxins.
I love those ideas. And I have a personal crusade, I would say, against plastic. So I'm glad that you brought that up. And again, speaking of the bigger movements and the nonprofit, including yours, whenever I have a chance, I will donate, especially if they're trying to do something public health related or decreasing chemical pollution and things like that, or saving wildlife. So I just want to thank you so much for our conversation today. And if you have one more minute, I'd love to do a rapid fire round with you.
Sure.
Okay, so number one question that I ask my guest is, what's the number one recommendation you have for people to improve their quality life right now?
Organic foods, shopping organic.
Love it. Question number two, what is your biggest message that you hope listeners get from today's episode and from reading your book?
The things that you do that are good for your health are good for your kids' health and good for our planet too. And we need you. We need you to do these things. We can't waste anyone any longer, anyone's life.
Yeah, thank you, David. And then number three is a fun one. What's your favorite pastime or hobby or some surprising fact that many people don't know about you?
Oh, I love to play blues guitar. I'm a big blues fan. So blues music.
So cool, David. Well, thank you so much again for this conversation and all your tips that you had to share with the audience. Please let them know how they can get in touch with you, buy your book, and just keep in touch with you.
Oh, please visit my website, davidwilliamsteinman.com or raisinghealthykidsthebook.com, and online at Twitter, or formerly Twitter, now X, by David Steinman, and on Instagram, davidsteinman_author.
All right, David. Well, yeah. I'll definitely give you a follow and tag you when we post this episode. And again, thank you so much for the work that you're doing in the world. And I could say that we definitely do need you. So keep going.
Thank you. Thank you, Marina. It's been great talking to you today.
Likewise. All right. Take care, David.
Thank you for tuning in to the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed creating it. If you learned something new from it, I'd love if you could leave us a 5-star review and share it with a friend who might love it too. You can find me on any of the podcast and social media platforms by looking up Holistic Pharmacist or Dr. Marina Buksov. Thank you for your support and see you next time.